Hello. I've just been musing that 2020 has been nothing short of a disaster. It began with raging firestorms across the east coast of our country, which decimated regional towns and communities. For the first time, we saw the military used to evacuate Australians in those regional communities as the flames turned them into ghost towns. For days, it seemed that Australia had actually entered hell's inferno. Thousands of Australians found themselves displaced and homeless. And if that wasn't enough, just when we were thinking about taking a break, COVID-19 suddenly found its way to our shores. It was like a tidal wave, what the Greeks call a pandemia, or a global pandemic. Currently, more than 10 million people have contracted COVID globally. 5 million have recovered. But the incredible thing is that more than 500,000 people have died. Along with the human toll, economies have been devastated. In fact, many are facing financial ruination. Actually, while what we're also seeing is this escalating unemployment, almost on a daily basis, along with the threat of a deep impending worldwide recession, which is bringing people to the very brink. We've seen the rates of suicide rise. This psychological anxiety that's everywhere is seeping through our pores. And yet, amongst all this darkness brought about by a host of different demons, a beam of light has really shone bright. And with it, a flash of hope and the beginnings of a movement, one to rise up against long-held racism. We've witnessed the beginnings of a different kind of global tidal wave. I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter protests, which were a direct response to the murder of George Floyd. Through all the pain and the darkness of the last few weeks, a new strain of humanity has emerged to lead us through this adversity. And it has shone brightly in our darkest hour. A bit like Britain's great wartime leader, Winston Churchill, who best illustrated this sentiment during World War II when he rallied his England against the tyranny and the might of Nazi Germany. And you know, while this light of hope shines like a beacon, we still need to remember that we're shrouded in a darkness, because COVID-19 is continuing to dominate just about everything we do. How we think, how we interact with each other, how we behave, and even how we speak. COVID has become a word we hear all too frequently, more than any other in the history of language. Every sentence, it seems to me, that we utter contains the word COVID, and that's a fact. COVID-19 has created real fear, brought a new caution to our lives, which is fair enough. It is, after all, a viral disease, which is proving for the moment to be unmanageable. However, it is important, very important, that we remain calm and not become hysterical. And that is something that's bothering me, because at the moment, there are cases of some politicians, along with some elements of the media, who seem to be embarking on a narrative that's opposed to being responsible. For example, the New South Wales Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, his recent comments towards Victoria and Victorians. What was he thinking? With Victoria experiencing what is a spike in COVID cases and locking down again, Barilaro thinks it's appropriate to grandstand and tell the people of New South Wales to stay away from Victorians and not interact with us. And that Victoria and Victorians have got to get more fair income and honest and stay away from New South Wales. Hey, I'm born and bred. I'm a New South Welshman living in Victoria. And I'm also proud to say I consider myself a Victorian. Indeed, Victoria has been my home for more than 20 years. But I have been embarrassed by what I've been hearing. This commentary, Mr. Barilaro, this line of hysteria and whipping up anti-Victorian sentiment, it's just not on. It was grandstanding, pure and simple, political hypocrisy. One that you would expect from lesser politicians. But John, you're better than that. And here is why it is hypocrisy, covered in this cloak of disingenuous sincerity. While the people of New South Wales were being told to not interact with Victorians, a little later this week, in the next few days in fact, we will see AFL clubs like Collingwood and the Western Bulldogs fly to Sydney to play GWS and the Sydney Swans. That's two Victorian AFL clubs hopping on a plane, apparently, supposedly, bringing COVID to Sydney. Can you believe that? Interacting with a community at the airport, then tackling GWS and the Swans players, possibly infecting them. And they, in turn, would go on and interact with the greater Sydney community. Now, Mr. Barilaro, that's crazy stuff. But if you're sincere about protecting the people of New South Wales, then you should have closed the borders. And Collingwood and the Bulldogs players should have been refused entry to the state of New South Wales. But it hasn't been done. So much for Victorians getting fair income and being honest. And so much for the grandstanding and the hysteria that both the Deputy Premier of New South Wales and the media have whipped up with this so-called advice. It's a cheap shot, designed for one thing, political gain. And the media has played along. But it's really only proved one thing to me. Mr. Barilaro, you're insincere. And you've failed the pub test. And that is to get fair income and be honest.